Now the fermentation process usually takes about 3 to 4 days to start. The full fermentation can take up to sometimes a couple of weeks. But after the first 3 to 4 days, you can actually put it in the fridge, cool it off, and at that point you really don't have to worry about opening the jar daily or twice a day, because the fermentation will be slowed by the refrigeration. But try to give it at least 3 to 4 days on the counter to let everything ferment nicely. So this jar is starting to get close to its max capacity. Give it one more plunge. And at this point, I need to make sure there's enough brine solution. So I'm going to come to the bowl here, in which where the dehydration was occurring, and I'm just going to pour in some of this liquid and see if there's enough to cover the vegetables. All right. Some people will, take this a little bit further. They'll try to roll up unchopped pieces of vegetable or celery sticks and try to put it there to keep everything pressed down. I haven't really found that to be necessary. As long as everything's pressed down and submerged, I've never had any sort of issue with anything growing. So everything's submerged in here. That's the key thing. And then once you lid it and jar it, once you put the lid on and wait for the fermentation process to occur, some of the bubbles may actually push some of the vegetables up. So when you open it to let out the pressure, I recommend, again, taking the plunger, pressing everything down, and you'll be amazed by how many gaseous bubbles come up to the surface. But that'll keep everything compressed, it'll get the air out, it'll make sure that you don't have any kind of issue with the jar breaking on you. Put a little more fluid in there. Excellent. Some people will actually buy certain jars that allow the pressure to escape. Has like a special little straw built in. Again, if you want to spend the money on that, go for it. I've never really felt the need. But then you just take the jar lid, seal it up, and just leave it at room temperature for 3 to 4 days while the fermentation occurs. Quick note on the jars. Make sure that you're using a glass jar, not a plastic jar, because the acidity of the lactic acid bacteria that the lactic acid bacteria will create during the fermentation process can eat through plastic. So make sure that you're using some sort of glass jar, something that can seal well. Also, I recommend make sure your jars are clean prior to using them. Some people actually opt to sterilize the jars in the oven with hot water. I just wash mine with hot water. I haven't tried sterilizing the oven, but some people believe in that just to make sure nothing's growing in there they don't want to grow. So I finished packing all the vegetables into the jars. I made about 7 jars worth, which is a little more than I expected, but that one green cabbage is pretty big. So these are going to sit. You can leave them anywhere on the counter. I just recommend somewhere with light, not in the dark. Just let them sit at room temperature for 3 to 4 days, and the fermentation process will begin. It usually takes about, they say, 2 weeks for the completion, but after 3 to 4 days, they say you can usually put them in the refrigerator. And the key thing is just make sure that you give them an open, I would say twice a day. Take the lid off, and I would even recommend taking something, pushing the vegetables down, letting any air bubbles come out, and resealing the jar. And that way you'll avoid any situation of the jar potentially breaking apart. I hope now you have the information you need to go out and ferment your own vegetables. So, the fermented vegetables have been sitting overnight, and as you can see, there's some bubbles that have started to form, which is the gas that's being released by the bacteria as this lactic acid fermentation is occurring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the jar and show you how to press down the vegetables, get any extra air out. We want to make sure that, again, these jars aren't going to end up cracking apart on us. So, alright. And again, sometimes those bubbles will push the liquid up a little bit, push up the vegetables. We just want to press them down. Let's see if any bubbles start coming to the surface. You can see that there's a good amount of bubbles that are coming all the way up, and this is all that gas that's being released. So it's showing us that the fermentation process is working and that everything's going according to plan. So it's been 5 days since I packed the chopped vegetables into the jars, and as you can see, the fermentation process seems to be going pretty well. The coloration of the jars has changed. The pigment from the red cabbage has made everything pink. So in the case of having a red cabbage or something like a red beet, it's okay if the fermentation liquid turns pink, but again, if you don't have anything red in there and it turns red or any funky color, you might not want to eat it. But these came out pretty good. It has that nice fermentation scent. The bubbles were consistently forming. There's even some still forming now, but the overall amount of bubbles that have been forming the last day or so has reduced, meaning the fermentation process has gone through the bulk of the initial stage. Again, this will continue to ferment for the next probably couple weeks, but at this point you can put them in the fridge, and I can really smell it right from here. So it definitely has that strong, slightly vinegary scent, which is natural for this type of fermentation. So to eat your final product, your final fermented vegetables, I just usually scoop them out of the jar. When there's a lot of extra liquid, just be careful about spilling. I usually fill a small bowl, and I'll eat these with as a side dish with another meal. But you can really eat them however you like. Some people will eat them plain. Other people will put them on a sandwich or a burger, kind of like a sauerkraut. Alright, so after all this work, I'm finally going to give these vegetables a taste, see how they came out. Pretty good. Pretty good. It's got that fermented vegetable zest. And I can also taste some of the different herbs and vegetables mixed into the mix as well. So I hope you found this video helpful. Any more questions regarding fermented vegetables, feel free to let me know. And if you're interested in seeing other recipes and other types of vegetables and how to ferment them, feel free to let me know. Thanks.